Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be joined by chef, television personality, and all around fantastic human being, Siobhan Detkovich. Siobhan, thanks for being here.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's so good to be back. Thanks.
So, Siobhan, you began your career at around 16 years old in the field of culinary arts, and by 21 years old, you became the youngest and first Indigenous woman to compete in Top Chef Canada. So cool, so impressive. What motivated you, first of all, to get into culinary at such a young age? And are there any other experiences that shaped your career?
Oh gosh. When I first started in the culinary field, truthfully, it was 100% by a fluke. We had moved from a city to a very small town in the South Okanagan, and that was kind of during the time that all the schools were on strike. So I was uprooted from all of my friends, everything that I knew, to a whole new environment, didn't know anyone from a hole in the ground. And although going into grade 10, they had put me into like a grade 12 food class. Supposedly there was no space left for grade 10s and for like any of my electives. And I'm like, okay. So they just put me in the grade 12 food class and kind of like integrating into a new school, a new life. It was a little bit of a hard transition at someone at age 14. So I'm like, I hate this. I was like 14, 15, I believe was around the time like when we had moved. And ultimately, it just kind of came around that the career counselor had come into the classroom and he's like, "Who wants to leave high school for a year?" And I'm like, "Yes, please. Anything. Get me out of here. I am your gal. Don't care what I got to do. Let's do it." And he had just mentioned, "All right, you just got to take a trade." And I was like, "All right. Don't think I'm quite qualified or really have kind of the knack to do like welding, carpentry, anything that's kind of more like hands-on, like hardy like work." And
Mm,
I was just like, you know what? I grew up on the res a little bit. Maybe I can do something worthwhile than more than just hot dogs and mac and cheese.
yeah.
So I went into the field of culinary. I started my career ultimately at Subway. Everyone's got to start somewhere. I worked three jobs at the time. So I worked at Subway, a little Chinese food restaurant, and then I started as a dishwasher at a little restaurant called Terrafina at Hester Creek. And
Okay.
that's where my culinary journey really began, was at the winery. And when I first started there, I was the dishwasher, and then my chef that I was working under had found out that I was taking the culinary program, and she was super jazzed because I was 16 when I was entering post-secondary. And she's like, if you want, we can get you up and do more prep work. We can get you on the line. If you have an interest in the culinary or like in the restaurant work, we can do more than just what you're doing as a dishwasher. And I was like,
Mm,
sure, why not? And one thing led to another. And when I was at culinary school, it turns out that the culinary director at the time was the chef that my chef apprenticed under. So it
nice.
really just became like, you're like my grandchild, more or so less. And I had big boots to fill because the chef that was currently apprenticing under, she is phenomenal. She was a very highly competitive chef in almost every competition that she had entered herself into. She came in second once, and that was by half a point. So
Wow.
they very much were like, you will become the new Jenna. And in my first year of cooking, I did 13 competitions, and one thing led to another. And then, 6 years after I was a dishwasher, that's when I found myself on the stage of Top Chef Canada. Hard work and dedication.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. And you're revealing something that a lot of young people sort of aren't aware of in skilled trades is um competition aspect of it. Getting to build your skills and really test yourself. It's not really common in other educational pathways, not that common. So it's great that you had that opportunity. You mentioned apprenticeship. Can you say a little bit about the Red Seal? Because you are a Red Seal certified chef. Can you explain to, in particular, students watching, what is the Red Seal program and what are some of the benefits of earning a Red Seal?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like the Red Seal program, if you're taking your culinary trade, every Red Seal is going to be a little bit different if you're looking at different trades. But for culinary specifically, you're going to have three levels. You'll have professional cook level one, level two, and level three. And as you're going through each level, there's a certain mandatory amount of hours and that you need to have logged and signed by a Red Seal certifier of whatever trade that you're going to be into. For culinary arts specifically, once you hit your red seal after you've completed level one and two, you need 5,000 hours minimum to be able to apply for your red seal. You can take your red seal course, but you can't actually apply for your red seal until you have all those hours signed off. And multiple different things qualify to those hours as well. So if you're doing any volunteer work, let's say if you're in the culinary trade, if you're doing anything like gold medal plates, or sorry, the Canadian Culinary Competition is what it's called now. If you're doing any like Spot Prawn Festival, anything like that in the Lower Mainland, anything that has to do with culinary. If you're volunteering your time, if you are doing competitions, those also count towards your hours as well, even if they're practice hours, if you're working towards it. So all
Nice.
those types of experiences do help towards counting for those hours. I was very blessed because of all the experience that I had kind of coming through culinary school and working my way outside of it. By the time I was 18, I already had 5,000 hours under my belt. So it was quite a quick experience, but the Red Seal trade is beneficial because there's a lot of restaurants that really highly value if you have that Red Seal certification behind you. But the good thing to remember, and what I always told my cooks, is that just because you have a Red Seal does not mean that you're top of the chain. Everyone is going to have different culinary experiences, and I've worked for chefs who haven't actually applied for their Red Seal, but are Jedis in the industry. So Red Seal is definitely something to just remember. It's like don't let it fluff your ego because it's essentially what you put into the work, what's your hands on, how do you actually work in a day-to-day environment that'll ultimately determine how do you actually build your skills, not just because you have the certificate or the degree behind you.
Good advice. Good to remember. Um, you also have a television series, okay? Dine Your Sign, right? Which combines culinary arts and astrology. I really need to know, how did you come up with this concept? What's it been like filming it or producing it? And how's been the reception?
Yeah, so truthfully, so that opportunity came around just after Top Chef had been aired. So that would have been 2021 after the episode started airing on Food Network. And when I was filming Top Chef Canada, I was like, I know I'm not going to win $100,000. I was 21 when we filmed that. The youngest after me was 28, and that was already a huge age gap, and especially in terms of like experience. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to win the money. I have little to no experience in comparison to everyone else, but I'm like, by golly, I will become a TV personality. If I will be remembered for one thing, it will at least be for either my charisma, uniqueness, and like talent, if you will, because I binge watched the heck out of RuPaul's Drag Race because we were the COVID season. So we were quarantined for 8 days before we actually started filming anything. And we weren't allowed contact with the outside world when we were filming. So I really just kind of immersed myself in how much RuPaul could I watch. And I'm like, what drag queens have the most personality and stick out to me, especially even if they don't win, but what makes them unique and kind of like how do they stand out? And that's what I kind of embodied in the sense, what characteristics of myself can stand out. And so after the show had aired, they had actually reached out to me asking to put in like an audition tape just to see because they were like, we have this cool concept, we would love you to kind of be in the running to see like, do you want to be our next television host? And so I put in the audition tape and they're like, we love it. You're in. We'd love you to be our TV, be our next TV star. I'm like, awesome, let's do it. And the whole filming experience definitely was quite unique and different, especially to Top Chef, because Top Chef was my first actual like on-screen appearance for national television. Whereas this one, it's not a competition setting, but it was a really fun and unique experience because it's like I had my own wardrobe team, I had my own makeup team.
Mm-hmm.
The schedule ultimately, of course, kind of revolves around you because if you're the host of the show, it kind of goes along with everything of like what you're after. I truthfully don't know anything about astrology except for the fact that I'm a Gemini.
I'm a Cancer.
But I think it's just like a fun kind of Rachel Ray-esque, like throw it on in the background if need be. Don't take anything factually, 100%. But nah, I think it's just like one of those fun cooking shows.
That's great because I was originally under the impression that it was your idea. But it turns out when you have an opportunity like, national exposure, people come to you and you said yes, right? To try it out and
Exactly. It's like
ultimately succeeded.
yeah, absolutely. It's like Top Chef. It's like, ultimately, if you're given the opportunity, what's
Got
the
to
worst
say
thing?
yes.
Like you're out there and you're putting yourself out there, and that's the biggest thing that you can do for yourself.
Definitely. Another question I have is, can we talk about the spicy tropical fusion Doritos that you helped create, or you d designed a new flavor for Doritos?
Yeah, so that was a really fun opportunity. Again, in terms of maybe coming around, meeting the right people or having the right exposure, I had the awesome opportunity that PepsiCo actually reached out to me. And it was one of those things that when they had reached out, I was just kind of like, Are you who you say you are? It's kind of the same with like when Top Chef reached out. Like I was very skeptical and I'm like, I need more proof to like, show me that you're not just like a bot. And they were like, yeah, we just need you to sign an NDA because we have this awesome idea. And I'm like, okay, I've been around the NDAs, whatever. Like, sure, I'll just sign one. And then that's when they had come around being like, yeah, we want you to be part of a creative concept to design a new flavor of Doritos. And I'm like,
Wow.
what? Like crazy. And we went through like a couple phases. So the first one was a really unique opportunity where the three of us chefs came together and it was essentially bringing your background and culture into the flavor of the chip. And how can we have all three of us come together to create a blend? And so I brought my Hawaiian background. There was another chef, Chef Andre, who brought his Jamaican background, and Chef Min was like a French Vietnamese. So it was a really unique opportunity to kind of have everything come together. And it really just started off being like, here's food, like actual food of what our vision and our idea is. And then there's a creative team on the behind the scenes that turns that food and turns it into those flavor powders.
Right.
And they launched in November of 2024, which was really exciting. I actually didn't even know that they had actually hit the shelves until I had everyone messaging me. And I'm like, wow. So I went to the nearest
Wow.
7-Eleven and just kind of scooped as much as I could. But I would say, truthfully, it's been more positive reviews than negative reviews, but the negative reviews only come by just because, of course, when you think of jerk spice, there is coriander in the mix. So some
Mhm.
people like with a little bit of like, the cilantro soap gene, sometimes it's just too much of a forefront for their liking.
Right.
But I'd say overall, it's been an overwhelming positive response of like how the chips are. But I mean, like even of the negative reviews, I'm just like, but I got to make a chip. So I think such a fun and great experience.
Terrific. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go try to find myself a few bags for
They're in
sure.
Costco now too. Yeah.
All right, there. And now
Yeah.
I needed a reason to get a membership. This is going to
Yeah.
be it. I just want to shift a little, Siobhan, to another topic. It's come up in our discussions with younger people, excuse me, groups of young people in skilled trades, and who are starting out, and it's around discrimination, sort of. And this can happen, of course, in all industries, including in culinary. And I was wondering if you had any experiences as a chef, as a female chef, as indigenous chef, in related to discrimination, and how you've managed it, and maybe even applied those experiences to the way you train and lead teams.
Yeah, so I think it's in almost every industry, which is unfortunate that there's always going to be some sort of discrimination, especially if you're looking at BIPOC people or even just like women, especially in the kitchen, or in hospitality is such a huge one as well. I have experienced many, many instances, of course, throughout my career. I did work with a lot of chefs who were kind of still in that 1970s mindset. If you can't do your job, get out and we'll find someone else. Of course, in today's world, that's just not the right mindset to kind of think about. And it's just not the economy where you can't just have you don't have people filtering and standing at your door waiting to come back and work for you. And so I've had instances, of course, where there's sexism, there's racism. I've been kicked out of a kitchen because I was simply a brown person and a woman and I stood next to the chef. Like there's been lots of instances, of course, that really have felt degrading, especially at such a young age. But the Lord has blessed me with what I call spite. I've been told I'll never make it in the industry. I'm not professional enough. You name it, it's been said to me. But ultimately, everyone's always going to be very different as well, right? Everyone's going to have a different take. Everyone receives feedback or words very differently. And I think just from coming up from like my own background, all the hardships that I've gone through growing up, part of me has always just been determined, well, let me prove you wrong. And that
Mm,
has really been kind of like the fuel that has driven me. But especially kind of coming into more of a leadership role, especially going into a leadership role at such a young age, it's always been such a huge focus for me to make sure that young people, even if we're the same age, but if you're coming into the industry so new, that I don't want you to ever have those same experiences that I have had to go through. I want to help create an environment that's a safe space that you feel comfortable to be unique and be yourself. But ultimately, even though I've had bad mentors, bad people that I've worked for, ultimately it's almost like a way of saying thank you because it's like thank you for showing me what I don't want to be. And there's
right,
very unique takes that you can take on it and ultimately especially being a woman in the industry, being a woman of color in the industry, I think what a lot of people also misconceive is confidence for anything else that it's not. and it's okay to be confident in yourself. And a lot of people are going to take that in a negative way, thinking that you kind of maybe have like a stick up your rear end, but ultimately
Mm,
don't ever be afraid to know what your worth is, know what your values are, and know what you can and cannot do. Because especially in the industry, being humble and owning your mistakes, that's one of the biggest things that's earned me respect, especially as a leader. Being like, hey, actually, I'm not like super familiar about this. And all those different types of experiences, everyone again was going to take it so differently. But learning from those mistakes and learning from others around you has ultimately helped shape to where I am today and try to continue to spread the positivity of creating those safe spaces for others, especially in such in times as today, where so much more inclusivity has started to come around and more people feel comfortable with who they are and expressing themselves.
great, great. I do relish though in the thought of someone who kicked you out of the kitchen seeing you on TV a few years later.
Yeah, part of me, I will say it was a very scary experience on Top Chef because in the back of my mind, all I had were those thoughts of everyone who ever put me down, whoever said I wasn't going to make it, and I think ultimately that did hinder me in my performance on Top Chef because in the back of my mind, I'm like, I know if I fail, they'll be there looking at the television, be like, I knew it, and so that was
Mm,
definitely one of the things that I always try to tell people as well is always just be mindful of what you say because even though it might seem lighthearted to you, or maybe if it's just something you're saying out of anger, you never know how it ultimately it'll affect someone, especially down the road.
right, right. I mean, and you made, headlines again, not only for being a young woman, but also being an Indigenous young woman at the time on the show. Can you say a little bit about how you mentor Indigenous youth, or do you feel as a part of your heritage a responsibility to do that? And if so, what kind of advice do you give Indigenous youth who are interested in culinary or skilled trades generally?
Yeah, so I'd say like truthfully when it comes to like my indigenous background, like a lot of families I think or a lot of youth, a lot of indigenous people in general, a lot of my history has been lost just because of the residential schools. So a big misconception, which I always try to at least be real and honest about, is people know me as indigenous and a chef, so they assume that I am an indigenous chef. And
Right.
I feel like those are very two different things where it's like, yes, I'm indigenous and yes, I'm a chef, but that does not mean that I am an indigenous chef because my focus is not on my cultural practices. It's not on what are the foods of my people and everything like that, because truthfully, I don't know what the foods of my people are. A
Hmm.
lot of the history that I was taught for indigenous backgrounds came from the Osoyoos Indian Band when they taught me about their culture when I was in high school in Oliver. So I was blessed to kind of know more about their ancestral background versus my band is Cowichan, which is Vancouver Island. And so with that, I always try to at least like bring out the messages where when it comes to Indigenous youth, I always let them know that it's okay if you don't know who you are. It's okay that if
Mm.
you don't know your background, because me, now that I'm 25, I'm still learning about things. I still get the opportunity to dig deeper and find out more about my ancestral roots. I actually know more about my Hawaiian heritage more than I do my Indigenous heritage. And these days, when it comes to cooking, I'm able to blend the two together. But when it comes to inspiring the Indigenous youth and everything like that, my main focus has always just been, especially if I'm going to remote Indigenous communities, it's like I too have also grown up on a reservation. I
Mm.
know what it feels like to be either like a social pariah or an outcast, and to have the world thinking that you're just going to be another one of the stereotypes, another one of the statistics, that you're just going to stay there, live your life, have children, and repeat the cycle. And for me, it's about sharing the story of, but here's what I have been able to push through. And if you have that passion for what you want to do, you can achieve anything that you want to.
Uh,
I had grew up with no one believing that I could grow up to doing like, do great things. But here I am. I'm able to work with local communities, nonprofit organizations, travel and do what I want to do and what I love in life. But it all ultimately will come down to how your attitude determines your altitude.
oh, I love it.
And that is what will skyrocket you. And so when it comes to the Indigenous youth, I'm not necessarily one to share my cultural practices or teach them about the heritage if we come from around similar tribes.
Right.
But for me, working with the Indigenous youth, it's always going to be about inspiring them to show them that they can achieve anything that they want to. Don't let the stereotypes hold you down.
I love it, Siobhan. Beautifully said. I mean, staying with uh, getting young people into the trades and sort of trying to get them onboarded some might be sitting on the fence. The skilled trades widely, including culinary, I think faces challenges, not just recruiting, but also retaining young people into the trades, especially women and underrepresented groups. Do you think anything can be done to improve this? Have you seen anything that's worked that maybe you've seen young women get into culinary or skilled trades generally, cool campaigns? What's working? What do we need to do better?
Truthfully, I think a lot of the trades, and in terms of not just knowing the fundamentals and like how they can help society and whatnot, I think with the trades, truthfully, a lot of them still kind of have the mindset of like a boys' club. And when it comes to all of that, there is such a dire need for women in trades. Doesn't matter what trade that you're heading into. I think, excuse me, one of the biggest things that can kind of come around and turn around is always going to be about inclusion and equality. And it's
Mm.
such a huge thing, especially when you're looking at, today's economy. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether even if it's in trades, but there's such a huge disconnect in what would a man make versus what does a woman make? And are they doing the same thing, but is there a huge pay gap there? And I find that that's such a huge thing that it's kind of like a deterrent, knowing that if I'm going to go in or if I have the skill trade versus someone who might be newer to the industry, but yet they still make more than me, then it's kind of like, well, where's that equality that's coming in? So I think a huge boost, in which I've seen successfully run by businesses, is learning to have that equality platform, learning to be being more people orientated than anything. Because ultimately, yes, you're here to run a business, but you're also here to keep your people happy because it is part of their livelihood. When you think about how much time do you spend at work versus how much time do you go and do anything else, you want to make sure that you're creating an environment where people feel safe, they feel welcome, doesn't matter their orientation or background. That is such a huge part of what I've seen successfully ran by businesses for worker retention.
Right.
And when you take a look at businesses, or if you know the behind the scenes of companies or businesses that don't, that's when you see it become a revolving door. And you know that people are just in and out, in and out, in and out because of, well, when you take a step back and it's just like, but what are your practices with your people? What are you paying your people? Is it worthwhile for them to be investing their time and their money at points and to work for you? So ultimately, I think it kind of comes down to those. Those are the big key points for businesses and trades, just to kind of always keep at the forefront because times are changing. They need to change with the times.
Fantastic, Siobhan. We talked earlier about misconceptions or myths in the skilled trades briefly. Can you say a little more? Are there any myths about working in culinary that you'd like to debunk?
Yeah, I think truthfully, when it comes to working in the culinary trade, I think I haven't seen it yet because I think there's like a little bit of PTSD not wanting to be in service at home. But I've heard that anything like The Bear from the TV show has been a great capture of what life is truly like in the kitchen. But one of the misconceptions that I think come from a lot of the unknown, if you haven't worked in the industry yourself, is like the industry is just full of like drug abusers, it's full of alcoholics, like it's just full of substance abuse, anything like that. You're not going to have a life, you're not going to have a family, or your life is going to be miserable if you try to balance the two of them. When it comes to all of that, like in the way of retention, kind of like keeping your people happy, keeping your people working for you and continuing to work for you. I think to kind of find that happy medium in terms of balance to help debunk all of those is finding an environment that cares about you and cares about your time. Because there are a lot of people in this world where you give them an inch and they'll run for a mile. And you really have to know the boundaries, not only for yourself, and it's okay to set those boundaries because if people get upset, then you know that those aren't the right people who are going to respect those boundaries. And finding those boundaries of what works for you. And also, when it comes to the culinary field, there's so many different types of areas that you can go into. It's not just like a cookie cutter, like one shoe fits all, more or so less. You can go into things where it's strictly just prep work. If it's a little bit more laid back, you don't want the hustle and bustle. You can go into like banquets. You can go, if you want to work at a hotel, work on a cruise ship, work in a cafe. There's so many different areas that you can kind of find yourself in that you don't have to follow the stereotypical that you're working like 24 hours a day doing this as your livelihood, making pitiful pennies. It definitely will kind of come on both ends when it comes to establishments and the people that have to work together to help debunk all of those because, of course, they've been around for so long, especially in the sense that a lot of people today still believe that it is still a boys' club and it is still heavily predominantly men in the industry, but there's so many amazing women who are coming out and doing their thing, showing that girls can be bad bees in the kitchen as well. And they are the ones helping shape the future of young women apprentices and showing them that it's not as scary as it looks.
And finally, Siobhan, what would be your message for a young person who's watching right now who is unsure if a career in the skilled trades is the right path for them?
Truthfully, I always just say, just do it. Never hurts to try something new. There's lots of scholarship programs that encourage you to be able to go do it. So if it ever comes down to like a monetary aspect, don't be afraid to do it because there's lots of support behind you to kind of push you and put you through. But also, if it's not the right thing for you, change is okay. You don't have to do it and then stick with it because maybe if you do try something, you can then venture offwards and maybe find something else that you're passionate about. Or with the networking opportunities, it connects you with the right people to find where you're truly meant to be.
I love it. Got to take a step and see where it goes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Siobhan, so many great pieces of advice. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This is the end of our virtual conference. I want to say a special thanks to Lindsay Rainan of the Lambton Kent District School Board and the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program for making this all possible. And a huge thank you to you, Siobhan. We appreciate your advice, your passion, your advocacy, and your energy, and for inspiring so many young people in your career and so many more to come. I can't wait to keep following you. Thank you again.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it so much.
All right. Bye, everyone.